Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, First Flights Special, where I talk about the planes in the book. First Flights is a flying circus plane pack that features 10 new starter planes for each playbook that are also completely original planes that do not have an existing counterpart in the real world, which mean they could be a little more fantastical than usual. Anyway, let's get going with the first plane of the expansion that's made for the soldier, the von Morgan Ogre, which has a big fucking cannon. At one time, Raphael von Morgen was a major member of the peace movement and a vocal critic of imperialism, but when Macchi invaded independent Hanriot in 1591, something changed. Von Morgen grew obsessed, reading a dozen newspapers a day for frontline news. He used his fortune from the airship business to expand into bomber designs, but the company saw little success owing to the military's preference for existing bombers like the Teak or Nashorn. Then the Fokker government put up an order for a single-seat airship hunter mounting a repeating 37mm cannon and tractor prop. Written off by most companies as impossible, von Morgen's engineers were able to adapt a single boom of their bomber design into a gun carrier. To achieve this, radical layout changes were made. The engine was moved behind the pilot to make room for the gun, with the exposed driveshaft spinning about 6 inches under the pilot's seat. The Oger was a victim of its own success. Macchi began using its airships much more cautiously, so most Ogers spent the war grounded. Forget its speed, forget its durability. When you want the Oger, you are only going for one thing, the big fucking belt-fed heavy repeating cannon that can deal up to 32 damage in a single burst. That's more than enough to knock a lot of things out of skies from sheer damage in one go. However, being the first official flying circus plane to be armed with the damn thing at its base variant, the plane sacrificed a few things to make it works, like being a bit hard on the turn, and has a rather high stall speed that you don't want to slow down too much. It is however a good energy fighter with high speed and overspeed, and you should use draw a bead move to make your shot even more devastating. You probably want to anyway because you are only getting 5 shots with that cannon. That's definitely a major weakness with the gun. It's also very easy to jam, so you might find yourself clearing up a jam more frequently than you like. And let's not forget, the repeating cannon has -3 to deflection shot, so unless you line up the target perfectly, you probably don't want to fire it. The oxygen mask is just here for convenience really, since you will probably be pulling out of a dive pretty damn hard. Also, despite the durability, I do not recommend getting shot at. The low radiator is just asking for trouble, but at least it's somewhat stable. As for its variant, there's only one, a late war production variant which removes wire, add 3 birch cantilevers and W strut caban, and +1 ammo. Somehow, this thing got even faster, even tougher, but it has even worse handling now. On the other hand, you have 10 shots with the cannon now, so you can use it less sparingly. So, the von Morgan Ogre, big gun on a not so big plane with big damage, but you gonna need to consider whether the rest of the cost is worth the big boom. Next up, for the witch, there's the Dryad of Han Riot, which is even more tree than living grove. The sunny region of Hanriot has been a perpetual colonial battleground for centuries. The second half of the Great War was sparked by a Macchi police action in the now independent UWF colony, and Rona pact counter-invasion. Even now, the SOP with expeditionary force, Goth armies, and warlords squabble over the region. The local Verloren populations of Hanriot have long resisted these invaders, withdrawing into the foothills to fight a long-running series of guerrilla wars. They have close ties to the region's witch covens, and the living grove aircraft those witches create from the redwoods along the northwestern coast are a central symbol of that resistance. The Dryads are modeled after the Gotha triplanes that once flew over the region, and they course with so much magical power that they reject iron outright. Every component of their engines must be hand-refurbished by the pilot or those close to them or it rapidly degrades, and no modern weapon has ever been successfully mounted to one without catastrophic results befalling its user shortly thereafter. However, given their incredible performance, impressive durability, and the kinds of people who fly them, this is hardly a downside. The aircraft may be unarmed, but the witches who pilot them never are.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
Yes, it's the most wood a plane could ever be, and despite being quite cheap, this plane has some ridiculous stats, like high handling, climb, durability. Its only bad part is that it is rather slow, flammable, and of course, not armed at all. The lore bit about it being incredibly resistant to any mass-produced technology is actually sorta simulated right in the airplane builder, because as soon as you try to add anything, the plane would immediately suffer. But hey, this thing can repair itself no matter what situation you put it through for the most part, and witches are obviously never unarmed, so it is in fact one of the best planes for witches. There's no official variant, but considering this plane is made in the wood with a pile of scrap for engine, you can probably argue with your GM on your custom variation, if you could even get that to work in the first place. As a conclusion, the Dryad of Han Riot is really one excellent plane, but maybe not for all classes, as it is unarmed, and which is a lot more well armed on their own when compared to other playbooks. Lastly, for the fisher, there's the Thorsted S1M2B Schreckensgans. Yes, that's a harpoon gun. A crown colony turned client state of the Fokker kingdoms, the Seversky Republic entered the war with little in the way of manufacturing capacity. However, wartime oil profits soon fueled crash industrialization, and with it, an aircraft industry to supplement its auxiliary forces sent to the front. The S1M2B was designed to support Seversky shock troops by diving onto enemy gun positions in precision bombing attacks, using perforated air brakes to slow their descent. They carried dive whistles which let out a horrible hoarse call as they picked up speed. The bomber was so accurate that Fokker retasked them to tank hunting, leaving Seversky troops largely unsupported. The Fokker Empire legally annexed Seversky in early 1599, Parliament's meek compliance led to protests, riots, and eventually full-blown civil war, and the short-lived Socialist Republic of Sikorsky lasted 6 weeks before it was gas-bombed out of existence. Surviving S-1M-2Bs were left at aerodromes around the Dark Sea, where their precision was soon put to work in a new task. Equipped with harpoon guns, the Terror Goose was adapted to pluck giant squid and fish from the sea far from shore. Yes, the plain name can be translated to Terror Goose, which is redundant because goose is already a fucking nightmare. Also yes, that's a harpoon gun, and you can use it to keep enemies from escaping or even just to board the other plane yourself by using it as a zip line. That's not all about this plane. It's fast, it's tough, lots of fuel, and while it might not turn well nor climb well, or have a reliable engine, it is the first plane in Flying Circus to be equipped with a heavy machine gun at its base variant, and it hits hard. 4 hits, 4 damage each, that's 16 damage max, equal to 2 medium machine guns, and yet don't weigh as much. If there's a thing that can be called as overpowered in both Flying Circus and reality, this is it. That's why you don't see this thing being put anywhere else for the most part, because this shit is just plain broken. And you are probably asking, who made the first heavy machine gun? Well, during World War I, heavy machine gun classification was for water-cooled machine gun mounted in very stable but difficult to move mounting that often requires several crews just to operate the damn thing. It's literally a heavy machine gun. That sounds cumbersome, but when you need a gun that can fire for as long as you can feed it ammo and water against waves upon waves of infantry sent out to die for hours or even days, this manslaughterer can unfortunately kill extremely well. The earliest example of heavy machine gun, modern definition 1, would be the MG-18 Tough, Tank on Flieger, which translates to tank and plane, the things this machine gun was made to defeat. Using the same Mauser 13.2mm Tough that was developed for the Mauser 1918 Tiguer, the MG-18 was a heavy machine gun in every sense of the word, the first of its kind, and then the war ended before it could even be deployed onto the front line. Then after the war, the German heavily armored Junkers JI made one General John Joseph Pershing thinking that there's a need for heavier machine gun. John Moses Browning then stared at the Mauser 13.2mm, commanded it to become 50 caliber size, and finally developed the M1921 Browning machine gun, which was then further modified into the venerable M2 Browning, probably the most famous and incredibly long-lasting heavy machine gun that got put basically goddamn everywhere and for good fucking reasons. Back to the plane, this means that the Schreckensgans has effectively one harpoon gun, 2 frontal machine guns, and another co-pilot controlled machine gun turret that's also pointing forward. That's a ridiculous amount of firepower, but this does mean that anything that gets behind it can shoot without danger. Also, HMG has higher AP than normal machine gun, so armor is less effective against it, and when this thing finally arrived, anything below is going to feel it. This plane is made for ground attack after all. However, like I said, the Schreckensgans is a bit hard to turn or climb, and it's also kinda expensive, but it has an amazing overspeed, so you really should use this thing like an energy fighter. As for its variant, there's just one, a wartime configuration that removes the harpoon, add dive brake, and 5 massive bomb. Now this is going to bring even more pain to those on the ground, and you can slow down the plane a bit on a dive, which can be rather important if you find out max strain is getting a bit low. While the plane might be very weird to use, what's with the harpoon gun and everything, the Thorsted S1M2B Schreckensgans is really good at preventing its target from escaping, and has more than enough firepower to rip things apart. Just don't get anything on your 6, and you will do fine. And that's all for these 3 airplanes, from the overarmed von Morgan Ogre with 1 massive repeating cannons, the almost all-nature Dryad of Han Riot that proves Tree can fly, and the dive-fishing Thorsted S1M2B Schreckensgans that can fish more than just giant sea creatures. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.